Hello, my name is Jennifer Sabourin, Director of Student Conduct. I am a part of the Health Activities Board here on campus, and today I'm going to cook a egg roll in a bowl. Pretty simple. I'm not big on dishes, so it's really a one-pot deal, and it takes about 15 minutes overall, about 5 minutes to prep, 10 minutes to cook. I've got most of my prep stuff out of the way, and I am working on, like I said, I browned my meat. So I use a turkey, and I use a lean turkey, 93% lean with 7% fat, so it leaves a lot of that healthiness to it. You're going to drain that, and so I brown my meat. You can also use pork or beef, and so anything that's, you like or prefer. I prefer turkey, and so usually use a pound, and then you get it nice and chopped up, usually on a medium-high heat to get that cooked. And then from there, after you drain it, like I said, usually I use a colander. Sometimes if you have, like the lid, you can be very strategic. Be careful though, because it is hot and it is grease that is draining. And so a lot of times you can drain it into a can that you're going to then throw away. You really don't want to put it down your sink because it's not good for your plumbing because that grease will solidify. And so after you've browned your meat, you're going to add a teaspoon of minced garlic, and then you're going to saute that in there. And so depending on how much garlic, a lot of this is probably pretty flexible for the most part. And so as you can hear, it's starting to go. We're going to saute that for about 30 seconds. Let it get a little brown, mixed in a little bit. You can use, obviously, fresh garlic. Clove-wise, you would just need to measure that out. I have a can of it or a bottle of it. I've also had a squeeze bottle. And that way, you can use it readily, pretty simple along those lines. And so after 30 seconds, you're going to then add coleslaw. So it calls for a 14-ounce bag of coleslaw. I have a coleslaw. You can also use a cabbage. So 14 ounces of cabbage. You will add that to this recipe, right into the bag, or right into the pot. Pour it on in. All 14 ounces of it. It does the pot that I'm using is a kind of a deeper skillet, I guess is what I would call it. Using a deeper skillet. So you're going to add that the cabbage. This recipe also calls for ginger, so it's ground ginger for 1 teaspoon. I'm not a huge ginger fan, so today I'm not adding it. I think the other part is knowing that in college you're probably not going to use, unless you're use a lot, like ginger. That's something that I'm not throwing in today. Another thing is green onions. Not a huge fan. And then the next piece that it's going to also ask for in our recipe is sriracha. And so sriracha currently right now is not available if you order it online from our Martins and the local one that I have here. But it is one that you would add right now. And so you're going to actually, add the cabbage, the ginger, and the soy sauce. You can use soy sauce, low sodium. You could also use liquid aminos. I'm using liquid aminos. It's an alternative for soy sauce. And so what it's going to call for is a quarter cup. So just a quarter cup of soy alternative or low sodium soy sauce. And so this here is going to fill up the entire piece of cup here for my 1/4. And then I'm going to add that to my mixture currently and help it cook. And as you can see here, hopefully it's helping it cook in. So stirring that in with my turkey, as well as stirring in with the coleslaw. What you're really going to do right now is saute it and let it cook down till that coleslaw is tender. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and put the lid on it. That's going to help speed up that process of sauteing. The really easy thing about this, like I said, is you can add kind of really as much or little as you want in regards to like the recipe. So it also calls for a sesame oil. Now this sesame oil I got at Martin's. It was in the kind of the international section a little bit. I've never had sesame oil before, but this recipe called for it, so I got it. Now what I would tell you is that it's not cheap. So I think it was anywhere between $6 and $8 for this bottle. So if it's one of those, it's kind of a wood taste, or like a, not wood, I'm sorry, a nut taste. And so kind of a roasted, toasted nut to it. And so if that's not something you really like, one, you don't have to add it. And then two, you don't have to purchase it if it's something that's not in your budget. So you want to make sure that if it's not in your budget, then don't go for it. Like I said, with the sriracha that actually goes in here shortly, you'll want to maybe, you could pass on that as well. You could use maybe a different type of hot sauce. That's just up to you. I do apologize. The neighbor's dog started barking, therefore my dog started barking. Of course, me cooking in the kitchen usually results in my dog not being far from me. So she waits for anything that might happen to drop when I'm cooking, or anything that I'm willing to share. So that needs just a little bit more time. It does say that if it's not going to, if it's not like sauteing or at least breaking down and becoming tender like you want it to be, you can add a little bit of water to help that process, just to give it some more moisture. What I did is I'm adding I've got about 2/3 a cup. It wasn't quite full, and so I only put in a little bit of it. So I'm going to let that sit for a second and let it kind of tenderize. Stir it here, see if it needs more water. And then if it doesn't, then we should be good to go. So with that, the green onions that it calls for, I'm not adding this time. I know also that depending on how often you go through vegetables, it's kind of difficult to add an ingredient to a recipe such as a vegetable that you don't use very often. And so therefore, if you don't use it right away, it could go bad, or if you're not using it for multiple recipes. What I would suggest is that if you're going to use a vegetable that maybe isn't something very common, find another recipe that goes with that. Like the ground ginger that would be added with the soy and the coleslaw. I'm not a huge ginger fan, and I don't actually know how long that kind of sits around in your fridge or where it rests, and so it's not one that I usually have. So just kind of playing it by ear in that sense. You're going to want to really play with what you're comfortable with eating, and then also with what's in your budget as well. Honestly, between the the bag of cabbage that is probably in the vicinity of less than $2, max $3, the ground beef or meat, depending on what you go with. I want to say that my turkey was just under $5 for the pound. And so yeah, there's beef that is in there around that $3 range, depending on what you're going to get. And then obviously my bottle of liquid aminos is quite large. Honestly, this is the second time I've made this recipe, and you can see that I've used about that much for 2 recipes. And at the end you can add a little bit more with your choice. And so it just depends on what your budget will hold, and along those lines, as well as how often you're going to use something. You don't want to purchase something and have it sit in your fridge or in your cabinets, unless it's obviously a spice that you will use in the future, but something that'll go bad. You just want to be careful along those lines. So I hope as this kind of finishes up here just a little bit longer, it's almost there. I don't really like my coleslaw or cabbage crispy in this. You can leave it obviously as tender as you want, but hopefully you're home and trying to figure out some different things as far as with being in the restriction of not being able to go places, and hitting a fast food joint like on campus. Obviously Mama Randazzo's that's right around the corner, McDonald's that is missing your business, Taco Bell that's open 24 hours now, so becoming creative with what can I make at home. So for me, tacos are easy, or some type of burrito. Like I said, I use turkey for those, and then Not too much mac and cheese because obviously when it comes from the box and everything, it's not overly healthy. So you really want to, pick and choose those pieces and not solely be set on frozen pizzas. I know that, in college it's easy to do the frozen pizzas when you get, you're up late at night. Obviously they called it the freshman 15, sophomore, I don't remember what the number was, maybe 20. There's a joke out now for obviously COVID-19, gaining the 19 pounds while you're locked in your house, essentially. So yeah, you just want to make sure obviously you're making healthy choices. I know that Billy is doing several, things on sugar. Billy Lewis with our student health, who's also part of this committee. And so just really paying attention to those sugar intakes when you're bored at home, trying to find other alternatives. So, but I am going to move forward with my cabbage. Careful with the steam. You want to open things away. As you can see, it's cooked down quite a bit. You can see the meat as well. And so from there, you're going to make a well in the middle. And so that well is pretty much a hole. It's going to look about like that. So you're making a hole in the middle, and then you're going to add an egg. So I have just a regular standard egg, and you're cracking in the middle, and you're going to let that set for a second while you wait for it to scramble. So you're going to scramble this egg in the middle, so it's kind of out of the space of everything. It's got its own place to cook. And then on that low heat or so. So you don't want it to cook ultra fast, but you're going to break that yolk in the middle. So looking kind of yellow. Let it cook in there for a second on that low heat that you have this on currently. If you see some of your cabbage that's got a little bit of that still needing cooked, a little too white, it should be more clear, a little more transparent. So if it's too white in color, you can kind of push that down towards the bottom and the base to help it saute a little bit more while you're working on the egg. And so honestly, we're pretty close to being done. The sriracha is what you would put in next after this egg finishes. As I mentioned, I'm not adding my sriracha. But once this is also complete, then you're going to add the sesame oil. You're just going to drizzle it over the top. And so no reason to really to measure it unless you don't feel comfortable, turning the bottle over top and having it all go in. And so really, putting it to where you're most comfortable, to where drizzle is comfortable for you. And so whether it's putting it just in a capful amount, now actually this calls for 1 tablespoon of sesame oil that you're going to drizzle. So actually I would obviously suggest that you put it in a tablespoon measurement. Since I'm not a huge fan of it, I would probably just pour it lightly over top, but that's your preference. My egg is just about done. So it'll look like the egg there. And then you're going to stir that into the rest of it. You're going to stir it in so that it mixes up well. Just as you would have it in your egg roll. So you can see it's all mixed together. Sorry if that's a little dark. Trying to record one-handed isn't the easiest, but we're going to have dinner here shortly. So making it work. As I said, you would do the sriracha next. It's 2 teaspoons of sriracha. You would then stir that in with this mix. As I mentioned, Martin's in my online pickup. It said it was out, so not much I can do with that one. And then you would drizzle in the sesame oil. And so as I mentioned, I would just lightly drizzle it in because, like I said, testing it last time, I wasn't a huge fan. And so it is calling for 1 tablespoon. And so I'm going to not put in as much of that. And then also you would then sprinkle in your green onions. And so after you add that sesame oil, it really does smell like a roasted nut for that part. You would want to taste test this before you add any additional soy alternative or the soy sauce, because it already is pretty salty from that original soy amount that you added. But you will want to make sure you test it before you add any additional pieces. I'm going to grab a plate, actually a bowl, I lied, so you can see exactly what it looks like with my egg roll in a bowl. Make sure I get enough egg in there, and it will look like so. So as you can see, it's got everything but the outside. It's not fried as far as being in oil. The only oil that's in there is obviously the sesame oil. And then you have plenty for, I think I had this last time and I had it for about 4 meals, which if you want, you can obviously freeze some and save some for later. You can definitely meal prep with this as far as, you know, eating it tonight and then having it maybe for tomorrow and then freeze the rest. So I hope you enjoyed my video on how to make egg roll in a bowl. I found it online, pretty simple. I know there's multiple recipes out there, so whichever you're most comfortable with and whatever you want to try. I hope you the best and you enjoy. Thanks for joining me.